Is Earthbound the best RPG ever made? Man, don't you just love stupid fucking rhetorical questions at the start of YouTube videos so that your ADHD bug brain can immediately be triggered into scrolling down to the comment section to engage with the content? Earthbound. Earthbound! Just in time for its 35th anniversary. Earthbound's like, I don't know, just always been one of my favorite games ever. So I'm really excited to announce that I'm finally ready to start playing it, just in time for this review. So yeah, Earthbound. We're doing Earthbound. What a wacky, zany game. When I had good memories of remembering this game, it made me smile at my brain. And that was my favorite thing to remember when I had the memories. Earthbound is so wacky and zany, especially if you're a woman with a septum piercing whose dad abandoned them. Known for its irreverence, irony, biting sarcasm, self-awareness, dark humor, and other words and phrases I barely understand, gamers everywhere love Earthbound because it harkens back to a safer time in America, when kids could go out at night and talk to police officers, and they would just tell you to be safe, whereas nowadays they would just empty their mag into you because of the all cops are bad. We all know the story by now. It's a classic story. We've heard it time and time again. Earthbound is the classic tale of a little boy on a big quest to travel around the world and travel through time to stop the bad guy from doing a super 9/11 on humanity. But how can one little boy hope to stop the supreme evil of the universe, let alone the supreme evil of this dimension, and still get home in time for dinner? Well, NES, our main protagonist, will have to use all the powers at his disposal to realize his true potential, and all his friends he meets along the way, to power up and finally defeat the evil Ganon. Let's talk for a minute about the backstory of this game's development. So, prior to his work at Nintendo, Shigesato Itoi worked for Sony, developing the Sony iToy for the PlayStation 2, which is what he's named after. When creating the world for Earthbound, he drew on his intricate knowledge of children, especially American children, to create the fantastical character NES. NES's first appearance, of course, was in Super Smash Bros. 64 for the Nintendo 64, and NES was intended as kind of a self-insert character for gamers to identify with, signifying the Nintendo super fan who owned all the consoles and games. It was only later that they decided to make a spin-off about NES for the Super Entertainment System, which gave us the Earthbound series we know and love today. NES's name varies in the different regions. This is typical with regional releases, but in Europe, he was called Earthbound Jim. Here in the US, we know him as NES. In the Japanese release, they simply call him Earthbound, much like Metroid from the Metroid series. NES is a really relatable character for gamers because he's a mute, autistic boy that goes around beating dogs to death with a bat like a sociopath, much like Gordon Freeman, another favorite character of gaming, which pretty much all Nintendo fans can relate to. I know NES is relatable because we even have the same favorite thing and the same favorite food. I know because the game asked me just to make sure. An additional fun fact about Ness is that he's a little bitch who wants his mommy to come save him, which is why he gets homesick and acts like a crybaby all the time. Furthermore, he comes from a broken home where his dad is just a voice on the phone, which mirrors the lives of most 80s and 90s Nintendo gamers who lived through one of the historically largest recorded spikes in divorces, again, making him very relatable. I guess Ness's dad is in prison or something, which means he's the coolest and most badass character in the game. He's in jail for doing something cool like stealing a 6-pack of beer, hopefully Keystone Ice. It's pretty much common knowledge at this point, but another well-known aspect of this game's creation and the backstory of that is the origin of the story for the main antagonist, Gigas. We all have heard the story. Gigas was inspired by a childhood memory of Itoi's. As the story goes, supposedly he walked into the wrong movie theater as a child, and it was so dark he couldn't see where he was walking, so he accidentally tripped and bumped into a wall and dropped his ice cream cone. When he looked down at where he dropped his ice cream cone on the ground, the shape he saw traumatized him so badly that he had to make a whole video game about it to process his trauma. Earthbound is known for its many clever nods to pop culture, such as its reference to the Beatles' Bohemian Rhapsody during the Yellow Submarine section. Apparently, Itoy was also a huge Seinfeld fan, and he added the Franklin badge as a reference to George Costanza's father, one of his favorite characters, Frank Costanza. Itoy was also, naturally, a huge Kramer fan, and he was greatly inspired by Kramer's resilience against electricity. So he combined the two ideas to create a defensive item with the ability to deflect lightning. The goal of the game is to take NES around to 8 different locations where he learns his quote-unquote funny little songs that remind him of his sanctuaries, just like this game reminds me of my favorite game. NES learns a lot of really good songs, like listen to this one. Additionally, there were supposedly plans for a Spanish language localization for release in Mexico where the 8 melodies were replaced by La Cucaracha. Once you learn all 10 of these songs, you can unlock your true potential. That's when NES has to go inside his own subconscious to confront his dark past where something horrible happened to him as a child. After you defeat this evil aspect of yourself by hitting it with a bat repeatedly, which is how you fix any mental problem you have, you learn a new type of teleport spell that allows you to teleport without running away. NES can finally face the truth about what happened and escape his past. So we've talked a bit about the backstory and the creation of this game's world building and its mythos. We know that the team worked really hard on this, making sure that you could control this game using Nintendo brand controllers, and that the game was full of wacky, zany humor. Chock full of that. But they went one step further to ensure the critical success of this game in the North America region. They made the humor in Earthbound so wacky and zany that the jokes actually smelled bad. There was an infamous stinky ad campaign about how much it stinks, which was an attempt to warn gamers that the game smelled bad, but nobody would listen. The ad campaign was originally inspired by one of the playtesters who was so enthralled with the thrilling, zany, wacky story that he shit his pants and refused to clean up until after he beat the entire game in one sitting.
Wow, this game is pretty zany and pretty wacky too. In fact, I haven't stopped playing for hours, not even used the bathroom. Uh-oh. Oh no. Oh god!
Alright, enough backstory, onto the gameplay itself. True gamers will immediately notice that this game has choice and consequence, something typically lacking in most JRPGs. You know it has choice and consequence because the game immediately asks you what your favorite thing and your favorite food are. I'm sure these choices will come up later in the game with huge impact. As with any typical white protagonist, the game starts with our hero dreaming of the letter N. So you get out of bed and you're free to explore a little boy's room, legally this time, and upon moving Ness, you're going to experience a huge problem that gamers all around the world complain about. It's a problem you're sure to get immediately annoyed by. Your character moves slower than Sonic the Hedgehog, which is a huge problem. I've heard rumors that this game attempts to address this issue much later on near the end of the game with a bicycle power-up, but I've never found any such item. The first thing you're going to notice about this game is that it's a total mother ripoff. Alright, no, seriously. That sounds like a joke, but Earthbound actually is a mother ripoff in the same way that Metal Gear Solid is like a Metal Gear 2 ripoff, except that game was actually good. Everything about this game is basically just a shittier 16-bit version of Mother, but executed in a tongue-in-cheek manner. Speaking of Metal Gear, Ness's mom says,
"What was that noise?"
Could it be? Is Ness's mother really who she says she is? Or is she actually Meryl from Metal Gear Solid? After some research, I found out Hideo Kojima had been sending bomb threats to Nintendo and demand that they add some allusion to the Metal Gear series into their next big game. After he sent a pipe bomb to Gunpei Yokoi and killed him, they knew he meant business, and they negotiated to incorporate the guard's dialogue in Meryl's hairstyle. So back to the gameplay here. We're walking around, we keep going back to bed and waking up over and over. What's the developer trying to say here? Like, does Ness sleepwalk constantly? Can he sleep okay? Like, what medications is he on? I mean, I assume he either is or should be heavily medicated, as he spends most of his spare time beating random animals to death with blunt objects. As a side note, at this part you'll see the dog, who's also white, is also dreaming of the letter N, proving dogs can be racist. I mean, I thought dogs were colorblind. Alright, now this game is really starting to piss me off. I keep getting sent to the game over screen. I'm getting really frustrated that I can't figure out how to progress. Even the dog is asking why NES isn't asleep. Will we ever solve this mystery? Okay, so after what felt like an hour of getting sent to bed repeatedly, we're finally outside, thank fucking God. I'm just wandering around until suddenly I'm beating a lost dog to death with a baseball bat. Good thing Ness didn't bother to check its tags and see if he could contact its owner or something. It's better that he just starts hitting it with a baseball bat. Anyway, this dog is a total wimp and it just howls like an idiot loser while I smash his head in, totally defenseless. This is more like it. I was getting worried for a second there that this game was just gonna be a total piece of shit with a bunch of non-stop talking. On our way down the path, we see a discarded birthday present, alone on a hill. This birthday present is deeply symbolic and meaningful. It shows the fragile nature of our youths, and it also symbolizes nuclear proliferation and Obamacare. Eventually, we walk up a mountain or something, and I guess one of the kids gets possessed and starts talking to you. I don't know what's happening because this is boring. Then you start to stink really bad because listening is boring. And I guess your antiperspirant broke down because you were so bored. Just like I am right now playing this. I don't really care about any words in games. I just played more like for the headshots, so all this blabbering was really slowing me down in terms of gameplay. Let's get back to smashing dogs to bits. Come on, game. So now you stink, and I can't figure out how to fix it. I'm really angry that my character smells bad, because video game characters should be cool and bathe regularly, unlike me. I do have to admit, it's an awesome detail that the developers included a fly buzzing around you to indicate just how bad you smell. This must be what the smelly advertisements were talking about. After all that boring talking, we encounter a really great fight with Starman where we're offered tons of choices and cool strategies. This fight really serves a purpose, again showing off the game's sense of choice and consequence. Alright, now I'm getting pissed off here. I keep walking around looking in all the trees for the thing that makes Ness not stink anymore, and I just can't find it. It really sucks that this game just stops like this. I was having a blast hitting dogs until now. God, it's a real shame that the developers made this gameplay so cryptic. There's practically no way to figure out how to make Ness stop stinking and progress the game. I can't even find anything about this in the hint book. So, what do I think about this game after beating it? Or at least beating as much of it as possible without some kind of real-life psychic powers to read the minds of the developers, or some copy protection code hidden somewhere in the hint book that I must have missed? I have a few thoughts about the game. As for general gameplay critiques, well, I didn't personally experience this. I've heard that eventually the game forces the player to choose whether to give funding for scientific research to Apple Kid or Orange Kid. I find it really frustrating and frankly audacious that the developers expect the player to compare apples to oranges when we know this is literally impossible. I will, however, applaud the developers for their bold decision, as it's a bit of a thumbing of the nose at the conventions of gaming. I think I get why this game wasn't a critical success in America. They didn't make the game stink enough to make people love the game enough. It was stinky. You know, I had to stop playing eventually because green smoke started coming out of my console. But it just didn't get me into the role of a stinky boy as much as the ads said it would. I mean, sure, my character smelled bad, but I never truly felt like I was stinking as the player. I couldn't identify with the supposed stench of the character, much like I didn't understand the movie Ghost until the actor Patrick Swayze died. But my personal biggest complaint with this game, my number one issue, was the PSI cars ability. It doesn't even show any cars on the screen when I use it. None. Zero. We know for a fact that the Super Nintendo was capable of rendering cars at this point. Mario Kart had been out for years on the system. Well, these may have technically been carts and not cars. This is still proof the SNES is perfectly capable of rendering automobiles. There was no excuse for the game to not show cars running over or crashing into my opponents. One of the reasons for Earthbound's commercial failure was a huge critical backlash from gamers who were disappointed that the SNES didn't parse and incorporate the words typed into the coolest think prompt that the player entered at the beginning of the game. Why even have the player do that at all then? It had always been a dream of mine for years to see video games evolve to the point of allowing the player to merely write in words or draw pictures on the cartridge labels, then have the console create a game. This should be easily accomplished by any competent software developers, but apparently Nintendo wanted to pretend this was a challenge from a programming standpoint. Software glitches and bugs are difficult to avoid in any commercial release, but Nintendo really had no excuse and dropped the ball here. Look at Scribblenauts for the Nintendo DS. This shortcoming on the game's behalf was a devastating blow to my enjoyment of the game because of a horrible experience I had when I was a child. My friend and I decided to make our own Atari game. We did this by drawing a duck with an umbrella on a piece of paper and then wrapping that around a pack of his dad's Winston Ultralight cigarettes. Upon inserting this game cartridge into the slot, we were devastated to find it wouldn't work. Nowhere to be seen was the duck of my imagination. 0 ducks and 0 cars, as a kid and now. That same disappointing memory came cascading back tenfold, crashing down on my head and causing the same trauma all over again. Trauma which was inflicted on gamers all over the world with Earthbound's failed coolest thing feature. People all say this game is so great because of how wacky and zany it is. It definitely was wacky and zany, but I thought it was just a bunch of bullcrap. I mean, I couldn't even get past the stupid forest part where you have to make NES stop stinking. And maybe if I had gotten past that part, I'd say this game sure is wacky and zany. No, but for real, I absolutely did not connect with any of the characters in this game, like, at all. Shigeru Miyamoto must be some kind of fucking idiot, at least. I think he has to be based on what he said about Earthbound. And I quote, well, paraphrase, "Most RPGs have parodies of real people or one-dimensional cutout characters. Earthbound characters feel like real characters. I feel like players will really connect with them." Okay, almost all the characters in Earthbound are one-dimensional throwaway jokes and parodies of characters, and all the dialogue is just shitposting as well. This works at various points in the game to comedic effect, like the mole boss that says he's the 3rd strongest mole, but there's 5 of them, they all think they're number 3, ha ha ha, yeah, we all laughed. But for me, the only consistent motif that this game's characters and dialogue evoke is that everything is a throwaway joke or a cheap gag meant to fuck with the player. Shit like this gets a few laughs, but it makes almost everything feel ingenuine, filled with a kind of one-dimensional intent on betrayal of expectations and misdirection, which ends up defeating its own purpose or downright annoying the player after a certain point. I guess it's kind of funny in its own right that the devs are just outright fucking with the player and their expectations, yeah, but that doesn't make the game emotionally resonate with me or make me think it has some deep, mature plot or something insightful to say. The game's designed to waste your time and punish you for playing the game as some kind of insightful lesson about how if you take a JRPG but make it about wacky jokes instead of dragons and shit, it's like, whoa, zany. It makes me think that this game was spawned by pure boredom, and that like game devs in Japan just simply didn't want to make the same Dragon Quest 73 again, where you go to the same dungeon, you fight the same dragon for the 73rd time. But instead of actually breaking out of that generic paradigm of JRPGs, they just made a shitty episode of Monty Python's wacky go fuck yourself dungeon. I don't know, maybe the original Japanese version is different, like maybe the characters talk and act differently, but I really doubt it. I think I'm happier just knowing for a fact that Shigeru Miyamoto is an out-of-touch weirdo who legitimately has no idea how to connect to human beings, which is why Mario doesn't even unclog any fucking toilets in his game series, and he's a goddamn plumber. Like hell, Wario does more Mario shit than Mario has ever done in all his games combined. Earthbound's creators supposedly went out of their way to make sure it was localized as well as it could have been, so I doubt anything is markedly different about it in any meaningful way. My actual main gripe with this game is the ending. It's just so goddamn jarring. The game chugs along just fine with its jokey bullshit until the very last second at the very end of the game, where it decides to get all heavy-handed and completely shoehorn in some dire consequences and sentimentality about praying to defeat the yucky evil. I genuinely fucking hate this. After playing what basically amounts to Dragon Quest 1 with goofball humor and a couple dick punch switcheroos, it just jams in this super serious ending where the player is supposed to have some big, meaningful revelation about how we all have to pray to defeat the evil blah blah blah. Fucking spare me. I mean, it's kind of like this review, you know? I've just been saying random bullshit and jokes the entire time, and now I'm just jarringly stating my actual opinions about the game. Isn't that making an emotional connection with you? Joke's on you, idiot. I'm not a hack Japanese game developer, so I'm actually capable of making something funny and insightful. Fuck you, HAL Laboratory. No, I really think this game would annoy me less overall, and definitely less for its reputation, if it had just stuck to jokes instead of ham-fisted awful attempts at being heartfelt or insightful in the last 5 seconds. The entire thing reminds me of like the 3rd Star Wars prequel, where they try to make Anakin look like a good guy after he slaughtered a bunch of kids in the 2nd one. Likewise to Earthbound, I just can't take it seriously because almost fucking nothing has built to this point with the narrative besides the same generic JRPG shit with jokes thrown in. As a side note about the actual fight with Gigas itself, wouldn't want to misgender the evil entity, it's complete throwaway one-note shit. Any game with a complete gimmick final boss can fuck right off. The fact that you just win by doing this shitty ability that only makes your nose run throughout the other 99% of the game is a total cop-out, so fuck that. The coolest feature of this part of the game actually is that if you play it on a pirated cartridge, the game resets and automatically deletes your entire save file as a final fuck you from the wacky zany devs. I honestly consider that version the canonical ending anyway, because the real ending is so ill-fitting and forced. The game may as well end hilariously with a full-on middle finger to the player. Come on, you cowards, bring it full circle. Make your big funny joke game a really big funny joke. Yeah, Earthbound can be funny, sure. There's a couple clever jokes peppered here and there. But overall, the entire game feels way too farcical to actually reach the player on that kind of a deep, meaningful, emotional level that people give it credit for being capable of. The problem isn't that Earthbound isn't funny, it's that it's funny in a shallow, one-dimensional way. And it's only that layered on top of an otherwise standard JRPG. It's willing to admit that it's self-aware, and it tries to admit it's aware about how linear and procedural the plot progression itself feels, but it essentially just ends up being linear and procedural while saying so out loud. It doesn't make it special. Makes me wonder if the developers were just really up their own ass, thinking they were insightful or something. Whoa, what if in Moonside, if you talk to this one guy, he hates your favorite food? Well, joke's on you devs, because I put my favorite food as pussy, so that guy's just a Yeah, you heard me. I said he's a total fart head. I don't really find it all that charming when games break the fourth wall to make a joke. It irks me in general when I play games. There's classy ways to do it, and Earthbound doesn't really do it that classy. It just shouts, "You are playing an RPG!" at you repeatedly, as if you're supposed to use your last two hipster idiot neurons to have some personal awakening or revelation because it made you really stop and think. You can admit you're being self-aware to set up for some kind of metaphysical quandary or joke or what the fuck ever, but doing it as bluntly as Earthbound does really doesn't set it up to evolve into much more than exactly what it is, which is just a blunt object that's a vehicle for throwaway jokes that pretty much just play on stereotypes of the genre while being completely stereotypical in its execution. As annoying as Earthbound is to me in some ways, I think it does still have value. Despite the ways in which this game and its fans pretend it's something it's not, it's actually pretty good for what it really is. So despite my criticisms, I'd actually recommend this game to other people, and I did personally enjoy my time with it. It's just that I see it for what it is. It's fine as a comfy, casual little grind fest. The combat's that kind of middle-of-the-road, low-engagement, brainless JRPG combat that's just entertaining enough through sheer visual and musical style to keep your interest, despite being nothing too special. There's some nice music to keep your brain from going completely numb, and the graphics are generally nice to look at from an art direction standpoint, as long as you like primary colors and a world populated by people with fetal alcohol syndrome. It's just not the end-all, be-all meaningful, whatever the fuck people say it is. I'm not gonna say I don't get why people like it, because I perfectly understand why people overrate the shit out of middle-of-the-road games and media all the time. Ever heard of a game called Half-Life 2? It's hard to be critical of retro stuff without being overly cynical or just shitting on it for any number of reasons, from anachronistic, jaded expectations to plain old personal taste, but Earthbound is a special case. I find it to be one of the most circle-jerked cult classics of the era. Just look at the bullshit that spawned from its existence, shit that I'm not even going to give the time of day in this review beyond saying you should be embarrassed to know the phrase "goat mommy" exists. I don't feel bad saying any of this because frankly a lot of you need to hear this. Earthbound doesn't transcend the stereotypes of its genre enough to be even remotely profound, despite being held up as a prime example of that kind of deep, insightful, or mature RPG. This doesn't inherently mean it can't be artful, or that games aren't art, or that it doesn't have a worthwhile story to tell. But the fact that it ticks like one box, the first box actually, in terms of irony or self-awareness, somehow instantly elevates it to some kind of legendary status in people's collective nostalgic memories and the cultural mythos of dark humor RPGs. Earthbound admits it has self-awareness and then just uses that one-note jokiness to carry it throughout. I will give credit to this game's lovable cast of characters like Oompa Loompas and Vomit. It's a nice enough casual grindfest with some light dungeon crawling. What it's not is really all that profound or super relatable, except for the whole being a mute autistic who bludgeons animals to death part. Art school dropouts and idiots everywhere revere this game as the gold standard for post-ironic, self-aware, wacky, zany, funny RPGs. It's obvious why. Its surface-level pastiche of Americana and suburbanite gibberish is elegantly woven into a beautiful tapestry of repetitive, low-grade, grindy JRPG bullshit combat, along with a healthy diarrhea shotgun blast of jokes which revolves solely around the clever subversion of RPG cliches that are meant to evoke a sense of hilarious irony and comedic juxtaposition in the mores and stereotypes of the genre, while it follows the trappings of that genre to a T. This made it incredibly profound to a generation of midwit latchkey kids who conflate pop culture with actual culture, which is why morons will pay $5,000 for a complete and stupidly oversized box with its phone book of unnecessary game hints. Well, that's it, folks. We're at the end. For everyone who actually sat through this shit, thank you guys for coming along with me on this deep dive through the bowels of retro memories, so that I could help you dislodge the rose-tinted glasses that were causing a major gaming blockage. Thanks to all the Patreon pals. By the way, that's a copywritten term. If I catch you using that, you will have a lawsuit in your mailbox, in your email box. And if you guys like what you see and you want a whole lot more, throw money at me. I'm e-begging, I'm a scumbag. This is the part of the video where you click out preemptively because it's all going to be the same mindless drivel about clicking the bell and subscribing and clicking buttons and shit like that so that we can all properly please our algorithm overlord. I make content for an algorithm, not people. Remember that. Anyway, oink oink, pay pigs, keep it coming.